Hello, and welcome to episode 100 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. My name is Greg Lindberg, and I can honestly say I had no intention of recording 100 episodes of this podcast when I started it back in 2019, but it's just been so much fun and so fulfilling that I've just got to keep on trucking. So here on this celebratory 100th episode, I should mention that a former guest of mine who appeared on both episodes 62 and 63 reached out to me and offered to turn the tables on me as host and put me in the hot seat here on Eyes Free Sports. And so while I've always wanted my guests to be the star of the show and have a platform to share their stories, I just could not turn down this gentleman's offer. Once you hear his voice, you might recall that he is a visually impaired skier, endurance athlete, biathlete, author, and overall wonderful human being. So let's go ahead now and dive into episode 100. Alright, so like I mentioned in the intro, we are celebrating the 100th episode of Eyes Free Sports. And first off, just want to thank all of my guests, all of my listeners, who've tuned in to the last 99 and now the 100th episode of this podcast. Just super grateful and appreciative of everyone's support and look forward to another 100. And so on this episode, we have a very special guest with us who's actually going to be turning the microphone tables on me as host. His name is Michael Stone, and he was a great guest on our podcast about a year and a half ago. And so Michael is going to actually interview me so that you, the listener, can learn more about Greg Lindberg, the host of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. Michael, it's all yours.
Thank you. It's funny because I what I wanted to do, listeners, was to introduce Greg, and kind of this is what it is. I actually approached Greg with this idea, a couple months ago, and it stemmed from a place of gratitude. For me personally, one of the greatest aspects of losing my eyesight has been the community that I get to be a part of. That's been cultivated. I don't want to say that I've cultivated because it's just and it's an extraordinary privilege. And there are enough people that are doing pretty extraordinary things, and Mr. Lindberg here happens to be one of them. And it occurred to me that as I listened to his podcast, listen to your podcast, I'll be very specific, Greg, that I know a great many of the people that you've interviewed, and I love these people. I could go name by name on many of them, but I know more than not, and and some of these people very personally, and it's such a privilege. But it occurred to me, and I felt a little sad that I'm not entirely certain that we really know who Greg Lindberg is, and I had the privilege today of speaking with one of our U.S. para Nordic skiing coaches, Mark Birdseye, who has your podcast favorited. Mark is an able-bodied coach, and he does wonderful things. As a matter of fact, we're doing a Nordic ski guide clinic up in the Winter Park area here in Colorado this weekend. And I happened to mention that I had this privilege today of speaking with you. And he said, Michael, I have that podcast favorited. And so here's a completely able-bodied, fully sighted person. He's a guide, doing wonderful things. But your followers are probably more extensive than you may know. And even he said, I guess I never really thought of it. I don't really know who he is. So today, listeners, we get to learn about Greg, and it was Greg's idea to make this on his 100th episode and celebrate this. And what better way to celebrate than to get to know our host and somebody who has contributed immensely to our wonderful community, our growing community. And let's get this rolling. Before we actually get into some of the details in your relationship to sports and life and everything else, Greg, why did you start this podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I just wanted to say it's an honor to have you kind of, do the hosting duties on this episode. And thank you so much. Just wanted to put that out there before we get rolling here as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I've always loved writing. So I will say, there is a connection between writing and interviewing and kind of how I ended up doing this podcast. So thinking back to elementary school, I loved writing and kind of got interested in interviewing people and writing down their stories. And I had the chance to interview my grandma when she was in her mid-90s, capture her story. I actually interviewed two ladies, both who were 100. When I interviewed them in our local Pinellas Council of the Blind, our local ACB chapter, and have just always loved capturing stories. I always say my philosophy is that there's so many great stories out there, most of which go untold, just kind of relatively speaking. And so in college, I was a journalism major and really kind of, dove headfirst into journalism and media, writing, interviewing, storytelling, that kind of thing. And so I've worked in marketing communications now for a good 10, 12 years. And I've just, again, always had that passion for interviewing, for connecting with others, but not just connecting, really diving into their stories, what makes them tick, what do they like to do, what don't they like to do. Just really hearing passion in people's voices is just so thrilling to me and gets me excited and kind of interested in what others are interested in. And so that definitely ties into, my goals with this podcast and kind of the inspiration behind it. And so in terms of adaptive sports, so I have mentioned on this podcast here and there that beat baseball is my primary sport, which I started playing back in 2012 when the Tampa Lighthouse for the Blind had an annual game. So that was really my first introduction to sports for the blind, adaptive sports, etc. And so, years after that, I thought, hey, why don't I combine my love of adaptive sports and beatball, maybe specifically at the time, with interviewing, with podcasting. I've done a lot of writing in my life, and I thought, why don't I kind of do something a little bit different instead of having to write down or transcribe what my guests or interview subjects are saying? Why don't I just make a podcast out of it and record those conversations and, again, really capture, like I was saying before, that passion that comes through in the voices of my guests. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question there, Michael.
Oh, anything but long-winded. Let's take it back a little bit, though. You said you were a journalism major in school, and where did you go to school?
College? So I initially went to St. Petersburg College here in the Tampa area for my AA, and then transferred to the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg campus, where I got my bachelor's in mass communication and then master's in journalism there.
Oh, that's fantastic! And I didn't realize how far you had actually taken that. You're just gonna humble me that much more. The fact that you have such high level education all the way through a graduate degree in something very specific. We'll get to the sports stuff second. So you did this without your eyesight. Conceptually speaking, for many of us, myself included, listeners, before we even started this, I had a little bit of an audio challenge. I got myself all excited. I have all this great equipment that I was excited to be using today for this very momentous opportunity. And I sure enough couldn't get it work. So now let's go back to to somebody who has a high education in this in this area. I struggle, having lost my sight to retinal degenerative disease, um, and relearning everything. Originally, when I went through school, I was mainstreamed, and I had no accessibility assistance whatsoever, and it was pretty miserable. Were you so when you were in school? Were you learning adaptive technology to be able to achieve these degrees that you have?
Yeah, somewhat. I will say for a long time. So I do have LCA, which is a degenerative retinal condition. Leber's congenital amaurosis is what it stands for. And I was originally diagnosed with RP, retinitis pigmentosa, and thought I had that, for a long time until I had the genetic testing and whatnot to kind of really determine specifically what my condition is. But thinking back, so I did have a fair amount of usable vision in my schooling years, which I was very grateful for, especially looking back. So I would use kind of the thick, stereotypical Coke bottle glasses and could read pretty small, quote unquote normal print for a long time, elementary, middle, maybe even into high school a little bit. And definitely used large print, textbooks. And I do remember my mom and I going to Kinko's back in the day and copying, actual whole textbooks, which may not have been a legal thing to do or ethical or whatever you want to say, but, we did what we could to get access so that I could have access to that material and be a successful student. And so I think it was around high school when I first used, I believe it was called Big Shot Magnifier, which is through, I believe it is Freedom Scientific. It was one of their products back in the day, basically a Zoom text type kind of product. And so I did have, a little training on that. And certainly as far as O&M, orientation, mobility, middle school years is kind of when I started using a white cane. But beyond those, kind of basic, if you want to say, opportunities for training, I didn't have a whole lot of other training or assistive tech support.
You had to figure it out yourself. You found out, and I don't. By the way, I don't see anything wrong with photocopying. I mean, I think we all had to do. We have to do what we have to do. I think the people who get the most credit are the people who are the most creative and figure out their way of doing this, because it wasn't exactly a how-to book to follow. And even in today, with all that we know, there's still people, and I have a feeling a great many of your listeners are still at that phase where they're trying to figure it out themselves. And there's many aspects under that heading. What year how old were you when you got your accurate diagnosis of LCA?
That was around 2011, so I would have been about 25, 26.
Okay, and that's old for LCA diagnosis. I think most people get it when they're still single digits.
That's right. Yeah. So again, like I said, was very grateful for the vision I had, and certainly the visual memories that I still maintain to this day.
Yeah, that's incredible. I too was misdiagnosed. With the I think it was like 3 times a charm before they got my accurate diagnosis of retinitis pigmentosa. So, I'm always fascinated with how people just figure it out. And so let's, bringing it back to you in journalism, and again, this podcast, your interest in journalism, and then figuring out how to make that work. You said you interviewed your grandmother and got to hear her story amongst others, and then over the years you figured out by interviewing other people, specifically in the blindness community. Were you working outside of the blindness community as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had 3 full-time jobs in my career. So my first job was actually with a national accounting firm, believe it or not, doing, blog writing, content writing, social media management, some customer service. but also interviewing clients. So that was a really cool opportunity in that job. So I got to interview probably hundreds of small business owners who were our clients, of our accounting firm. And so they had businesses, anything from, selling cake pops to one guy who was a referee for football games. And so just a huge, range and variety of people from all over the world, really. And learned so much through that experience, making those connections with such a variety of individuals.
That's amazing. Did they know you were blind?
No, most did not.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it came up here and there, but no, they really didn't.
I find that amazing. So who was your first, since we're doing 100 episodes, who was your first episode under Eyes Free Sports?
Yeah, for Eyes Free Sports, it was actually Dave Wanzik, who is a professor at Ohio University. And so he wrote a book on beep baseball. And so I met him at one of the beep baseball World Series tournaments, the World Series back in 2019. And so he actually gave a little talk, one evening after the games. And for some reason, I just kind of was really taken by his message and just the stories that he relayed in his book, and certainly in his little talk that he gave as well about interviewing, beep ball players and writing about beep baseball. And so I approached him and said, hey, I'm thinking about starting this podcast. Would you be interested in potentially coming on as a guest? And he was like, yeah, that sounds like a great concept, not only for a podcast, but would be honored to. And so he himself is actually fully sighted, but just the connections that he had made, in beep baseball through writing a book and spending so much time with a lot of these athletes and really getting to know them, thought would be a really kind of interesting, first episode.
And so you were introduced to beep baseball through the Lighthouse, you said?
Yeah, so it was the Tampa, Florida Lighthouse for the Blind. That used to have an annual game, and I got to play in that back in 2012.
So I hear baseball, and I immediately have to work off the panic attack of me trying to follow a ball at 7, 8 years old, and how frequently that ball ended up hitting me in the face. That was a pivotal moment when I decided that I would have nothing to do with sports. Lo and behold, later in life, to find out that I actually am okay at it. Describe what this sport is.
Yeah, so for those who aren't as familiar, so beep baseball is an adapted form of baseball for the blind and visually impaired. So, essentially everyone is blindfolded as far as the batter and the fielders go. And so the pitcher and catcher are fully sighted, although there have actually been some visually impaired pitchers, that have enough vision to be able to successfully do that, which is just amazing. So the pitcher throws the ball, to the batter, and then so the ball is like an oversized softball, essentially, that makes a beep, 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 constant beep sound. And then the two bases, so in beep baseball, you just have first and third base. There's no second. And so you have to run to either first or third, which you don't know which one is going to be buzzing after you do hit the ball, assuming the ball is fair and actually goes 40 feet. So that's kind of another, detail. So if you hit the ball and you run to one of the bases and successfully touch that base before one of the fielders picks up the ball, then you score a run for your team. If one of the fielders picks up that ball first, then you're out.
So they have to locate it. How many fielders are there?
6. There's usually 6 fielders, and there are a variety of formations and ways that the fielders can be arranged out in the field.
Is that strategic per team? Like they decide how many they're out of the 6, how many are going to be far back, close up, and is it dynamic, or are they constantly moving around?
Yeah, it's definitely a subjective thing by team, how they position those players. And, certainly when a ball is hit and it's trying to be fielded, there is a lot of action and running around, and obviously communication is huge so that you're not colliding with your teammates, whatnot. So yeah, definitely a lot going on out in the field.
So if a fielder is running towards the ball, uh, the fielder themselves are making sound. So
Yeah,
alert their another fielder that, hey, I've got this.
exactly.
Back
Yep.
off. Um,
Right.
and and so you've got a sighted pitcher, sighted catcher, six blind players out into the field. Um, and other than that, is it? Uh, and so okay, you successfully made it to first base because you outran the fielder.
Right.
Okay, do you keep going?
No. No.
Okay,
Once you do touch the base, you do have to make contact with that base. And then, so then the umpire would say, that it's a run, and that would be a run for your team. And I should mention, if you hit the ball at least 170 feet, then it's actually a home run,
okay.
which collects 2 runs for your team. So,
That's so how does third base get involved?
so basically, I mean, traditionally, what they will do is if you hit the ball, let's say to the right side of the field toward first base, then they will sound off third base. So then you'll have to run to third, or vice versa. If you hit the ball to the left side of the field, then they'll sound off first base, and you'll
Okay.
have to run to first
Okay,
to
so it's
try to prevent, potential collisions, or so that the action on one side of the field is essentially kind of separate from you running to the base.
okay. So you hit the ball, and someone will say, "Greg, run to third base, not to first
No,
base."
so the base is actually buzzing. It's making a constant buzz. So there's someone that
Gotcha.
activates that sound. Yep. So then you have to pay attention, and it's definitely common that a lot of people start running to the wrong base, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh crap, this I need to go back."
And at that point, do you have to go back to essentially home plate, or can you triangulate your way to the correct base?
Yeah, technically, I believe you do have to go back, and if the pitcher, is probably going to be standing there, and potentially fielders, so to avoid all that, you would have to turn back around and reverse your direction. Yep.
So are these games, could they be high scoring games?
Yeah, there've been a lot of them that are into the 20s, 30s in terms of runs. So some of these teams, when they get going, they're raking like crazy. They're scoring bunches of runs, 5 runs here, 10 runs there. It's offense is definitely pretty common in these games.
So uh, how many innings are there? How's that work?
Yeah, so a traditional game would be 6 innings. Unless it is tied, then you would continue to play, until you have a winner.
Okay, and how is an out made? Oh, an out is made basically by if when the fielder outruns you essentially to the ball.
Exactly.
Okay,
Unless you do strike out. I mean, that strikeout I should have mentioned as well.
and
So the NBBA has tinkered around with, for a long time it was 4 strikes you would get, and then one year they tried 3. I think they're back to 4 now. And then you can get a pass ball. So essentially, if you don't want to swing, or a lot of times I will just take that first pitch, or maybe the last pitch until I have my final strike, just to kind of hear the ball without having to swing at it, which is kind of a nice little, gift pitch, shall we say.
yeah, but it doesn't sound easy. Give pitch or not, there's we're not in a vacuum. All right, right, you're outside. There's wind. There's could be weather.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. A lot of elements and factors. Yep.
So most importantly, well, thank you for that description. Believe it or not, that's the first I've heard it described with such detail. I've read paragraphs here and there on it, and none of it did it justice. Um, And I'm curious because I have the privilege of uh, it being on the school board, the board of trustees for the Colorado School for Deaf and Blind. And I'm going to have to, at my next board meeting, ask about that because um, I'm finding it exhilarating, hearing you talk about it. But tell me, uh, what do you love about this sport?
Yeah, several things. I would say the biggest thing that I love about it, and have interviewed many beat ball players and in general athletes that get the chance to play a sport where you can really have some independence, out on the field or court or whatnot. I think independence is a big part of it. Being able to run to a base, which is essentially 100 feet, without a guide, without a cane, without a guide dog. Being able to dive for a ball in the field, without somebody else. There are spotters too. I should have mentioned that there's a spotter at first and third that do give out they'll yell out just one time a number of the fielder, either 1 through 6 in that range, so that you do have some idea of kind of that it is coming toward you or kind of in your vicinity. But just the independence of being able to score, being able to make outs, make plays, be involved in athletic competition, without, again, the need for those things that are so common in our lives on a day-to-day basis, I think is so incredibly powerful. And it's such a unique environment that's just so different in so many ways from, like I said, our daily lives and kind of the daily challenges and struggles that we deal with. So that's definitely by far the number one thing I enjoy about it. And just, competition, competing against others, camaraderie of your teammates, meeting people, there's so many benefits to being involved, especially in a team sport, but really any sports in general. And I think all of those reasons are just, huge and speak volumes about why I myself and so many others are so passionate about beat baseball.
It's amazing how often independence comes up, for us all, and in the spirit of how we started this conversation about community. I think that is very high on most of our lists. And it's interesting because while you refer to this as an adaptive sport, it really is its own sport. Uh, yes, okay, there's a concept of baseball, and there's a pitcher and a batter and such, but everything else realistically is its own. It is its own sport. It doesn't even feel to me like an adaptive sport because there's just so many things that are unique to itself, and that might be in semantics. But we sometimes talk about goal ball because goal ball is for blind people. It is not an
Right.
adaptive sport. It's not, and in many ways, and I find that incredible. But as I hear you describe baseball, the baseball specifically is its own sport.
True. Yeah, like you said, it's such a unique game, and it is a sport that anyone can play, even if you are fully sighted, if you have that blindfold on and you're not trying to peek through, or there have been cases of, players that have at least some usable vision trying to look or position their blindfold in a certain way to be able to at least see something. But if you do, quote unquote, play by the rules, it is accessible really to anyone that wants to try it as well.
So you don't use the blackout goggles that they use in goal ball.
Right. Yeah. So it's more of a kind of a soft, blindfold, or I've heard the term mindfold, which might be a brand name for beat baseball.
Yeah, the blindfold. It's they're it's interesting because the mindfold has become kind of axiomatic. A lot of O&M instructors use it and such, but I think the general purpose of that was so people could focus during meditation and or just in the need to relax. Um, but yeah, those the blackout goggles. John Alticuscu had shared a link, and I have them here at the house, and I do a great much of my training and such wearing them for a great many things. It's interesting that they haven't used it for beat baseball. Maybe eventually they'll get there. Um, it certainly takes away any potential for cheating. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice to any of the the NBBA board members or beat ball higher ups listening.
Yeah, I mean there's an existing product that's used, and all right, but so independence and being part of a team. Are there other sports that you've done over the years?
Yeah, so when I did have a little more vision, so I was on bowling leagues for a long time, a good 20 years or so. Starting at the age of, I think, 7, I joined my first league. And so have always enjoyed bowling. The last couple years, I've kind of started getting back into bowling. So it was one of those sports that I kind of gave up, and having lost more vision, over the last several years, it just was not enjoyable to me and became more difficult. But I have definitely embraced the guide rails and, some of the simple adaptations, having a spotter when it comes to bowling for the blind. And so about a year ago, I did compete in my first blind bowling tournament in Daytona Beach, Florida, which was a ton of fun. And I will say, it's even to this day, I'm still maybe getting a little adjusted, not totally 100% bought in yet, just because I did bowl as a sighted individual for so long. But I absolutely still enjoy the thrill of throwing the ball and getting that strike, picking up that spare, whatnot, and just kind of the reward that you get in those situations.
What is blind bowling?
Yeah, so it's basically kind of an adapted form of bowling. So there are these guide rails. I don't know if you've ever seen or felt one of those. So it's basically like a rail that is placed between the ball return and the foul line. And then so you take your either your left hand or right hand, depending on which one you use to throw the ball with. Using the other hand, you just guide yourself up to the foul line. So then you know that you're lined up and you're in the right position at the foul line to release the ball. So that's really the only adaptation you could say when it comes to bowling for the blind.
So there's still gutters.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these guys really they don't block the ball from going into the gutters. It just keeps you. It's an alignment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's amazing. Have you? I mean, baseball. It's very active. Obviously, running. Did you run train? Do you still run train?
Here and there. Honestly, I should do more of that. I mean, it's more so, yeah, I'm definitely more of a sprinter, like running to a base, 100 feet versus longer running.
Have you ever had any setbacks, injuries with it?
Yeah, so I did dislocate my shoulder actually earlier this year playing beat baseball in a tournament in Atlanta, Georgia. And so really that was my first major injury in athletics. I did break my wrist in 5th grade falling off the monkey bars, 25 years ago, 26 years ago now, whatever that is. But so it's really been a long time, since I've had any kind of major injury where I've had to, wear a sling and do rehab and work with a physical therapist. And it's been quite a journey. And definitely has tested my patience in a lot of ways. And there have been days where I thought, you know what, I don't know if I want to get back out there on the beat baseball field. Still have not yet. But at this point, I pretty much made up my mind that I do. I don't want to let this hinder me, just one experience, because I know a lot of individuals, in terms of athletes, go through far worse injuries and have dealt with far more and yet still get back up and are just as successful as they were before. But it absolutely has kind of, given me thoughts that I never had before, kind of the negative thinking towards sports and kind of the worry and the anxiety, once I do get back out there. But in my heart, like I said, I definitely do not want this to hold me back from playing and competing in a sport that I love so much.
And so those negative thoughts that you had, how did you cope with that?
Yeah, I would say talking to other beat ball players. I have connected with a few actually that have had the same injury, the shoulder dislocation, and just hearing their stories of how they were able to bounce back and kind of what it took and kind of overcoming that, those fears that are destined to come, once you are back out there, and also just, learning some other strategies on sliding, on, especially when you hit that base in beat baseball. It's so common that people fall over, they fall down, and so many things can happen, when you fall, when you hit the ground. Our bodies are so vulnerable to injury, unfortunately. So that is something I do want to work on, just in terms of, safely falling and potentially even wearing, elbow pads, shoulder pads, more protection, things I didn't necessarily think of, before this did happen.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give a newcomer into the sport? When you inform them that these injuries are quite common. In other words, if you could tell your say 25-year-old self, or just the version of you that was new to the sport, what would you say now that you've had this experience?
Yeah, I would say, just maybe be a little more thoughtful, be a little more considerate and accounting for potential risk, potential injury. Just realize that it is certainly a possibility, in any kind of sport. Let's face it, we can injure ourselves, from minor to something very serious. And I guess, I really didn't have those thoughts, like I said, before this happened, quite as much in my mind. But I would also tell that self, if something were to happen, don't let it get you down. Keep moving, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep moving, because there's no sense in not pursuing your passions and enjoying what you love to do. Even though there might be some hiccups along the way that kind of hinder your ability, at least temporarily, to do those things.
Yeah, that's probably great advice and a great metaphor for a great many things. Um, you know, it's and those setbacks, and I think in sport in general, it's just nobody is immune to that. And there's just there's more things that can go wrong than can go right. Um, and
True.
and really learning how to deal with that, and because that can be dark. Um, as it's something that I've always called the blindness world. I've always called it the plus one factor. In other words, we get
Right.
all the normal stuff that every human being goes through plus this. And I think anybody with a disability can relate to that. Sometimes it's plus two, plus three. And, I think that is also subjective. However, our sports, and you equated it earlier to independence. When our independence leaves us, and we're faced with a very vulnerable feeling that sometimes could feel all too familiar, and our sport, our activity, our passions, that's our escape. And you sharing the story is very important, I think, for us all to reflect on. and congratulations for moving past it. I think we'll all look forward to hearing about your first game back and and how that goes. Speaking of passions, you know, as is most of us in the blind community, we're not necessarily singular minded. A lot of us have other interests that have sometimes little to do with our sports, and something that you and I both have in common, but we've never talked about it, is music. Um, and what's music for you?
Yeah, so I should mention that I did take piano lessons as a youngster. I think I was around, kind of that 6 or 7 age, kind of when I started bowling. I remember my brother and I both started bowling and, taking piano lessons around the same time in our lives. And so did that for a good 6 or 7 years and got the chance to perform in some recitals. And at the time, I was pretty much able to read, music notation with magnification. So really can't speak a whole lot about, kind of the accessibility of when it comes to performing as a pianist. But kind of got to the point of, say, middle school where I thought, this isn't cool anymore. I don't want to do this, which looking back, definitely kicking myself that I didn't continue and really did enjoy, just playing. I remember like blues music and jazzy kind of music and that upbeat, tempo and melody and rhythm, and really just embrace that genre and getting to perform and play that. And was really out of music, was not really involved in anything for a good about 15 years, until I did receive as a Christmas gift from my parents. I got an acoustic guitar, a Fender guitar, and had talked about for a while, wanting to learn to play guitar, and just thought it was a super cool instrument that was, pretty versatile. You could play almost anything on guitar. So got that gift for Christmas and started taking lessons about a year, maybe 6 months, year or so after getting the guitar. And so I did take lessons for a couple years at a local music store here in the Tampa area, here in Florida. Also took voice lessons a couple years after that, and so have just really embraced, guitar playing and singing, and I have done a handful of gigs here and there, nothing steady, and certainly COVID kind of took a toll on the in-person gigs and whatnot. But I actually just performed the other day at, believe it or not, it's called Rock the Barriers. And so it's basically an adaptive sports event for people with all disabilities, but they also have performers, artists, all types of artists, with the opportunity to perform. And so I got to do a set of, just 6 songs at that particular event. But that was really kind of the first time I had performed, for an event kind of in the disability community. I have done some things on Zoom through ACB, and which has been a lot of fun. But as far as in person, this was the first time, I really got that opportunity.
It's fantastic. So it was just you and a guitar?
Yeah. Yep.
That's amazing. I'm a longtime guitarist myself, and the idea of and I've been trying to figure out how to sing and play at the same time, but that's a work in progress. I very much enjoy collaborating with other blind musicians around the world, but I'm still, as you could tell by being technically challenged, I think I've got every piece of gear you could possibly think of, and there's some spectacular people out there in the world that are doing extraordinary things in music recording. Byron Hardin from IC Music, based out of the Chicago area, has proven that he can teach completely blind people to be basically recording producers, engineers, and make a living doing it. It's actually pretty spectacular. It never ceases to amaze me where people can go with that. I have another good friend, Steve Baskus, another blind musician, but I think he's been at Berkeley learning how to do work in the audio industry. And there's so much there. And I mean, to me, the fact that you could grab a guitar and just start performing like that is incredible. And it's also fascinating because here you are, 100 episodes in, and how many of these people, how many of us knew that you had this side to you? It's kind of amazing. You mentioned blues and jazz and all that. Do you have a favorite composer, performer?
Honestly, and in that particular genre, not really. That was kind of my old school piano days, as a child. Now I really enjoy, playing covers of a lot of pop artists. Anyone from Ricky Nelson to Jimmy Buffett to Bryan Adams, Tom Petty, even some of the newer stuff, Panic at the Disco, Maroon 5. So really, yeah, more so kind of the pop genre that I've really embraced as a guitarist.
Awesome. So what 6 songs did you do at Rock the Barriers? Was that what it was called?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see if I can remember off the top of my head, at least a few of them. So I did Margaritaville, as a tribute to Jimmy, who we recently lost. Running Down a Dream, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, which I feel like is kind of the metaphor there in terms of the disability community. I thought made a lot of sense. Also High Hopes, newer song from Panic at the Disco. Again, just kind of that positive message and, striving to be our best. Let's see, some CCR. I did Bad Moon Rising, which, kind of that Florida theme, mentioning the hurricanes and whatnot. I'm trying to think what else. Oh yeah, I did do A Hard Day's Night from the Beatles. Definitely one of my favorite songs to play, just very upbeat and kind of high energy. Yeah, those are the ones I can think of.
Fun. I mean, that's upbeat. That's not an easy one to do. I mean, if anybody's ever heard Paul McCartney doing it, I mean, he just belts that out.
Oh yeah,
you're a soft spoken person. I mean, you've got that incredible voice. It's soothing. And I'm trying to, picture it. I almost want to grab a guitar right now and jam with you. Maybe I'll have to do that in another episode.
Would be fun.
Yeah. So that's performing music. Are you doing anything else with recording or?
I did want to mention, so I did attend this, it was called the Song Site Music Mentoring Retreat last year, and that was put on by Scott McIntyre, who some of our listeners might know. So he's a legally blind artist who was on American Idol in 2009 and finished in the top 10. So he presented for the first time this program out in the Phoenix, Arizona area last fall. And so there were 7 of us, blind and visually impaired artists, who got together, and so it was quite a unique experience, very, very empowering. And to kind of top off the event, we got to record this song called "Let the Light In," which is on YouTube if you just search for Song Site, SONGSIGHT, and "Let the Light In." So that was really the first time I'd kind of delved into the whole world of recording and production, and he actually had, producers there and people working on, the recording, and it obviously took several weeks to kind of put the finishing touches on it and put it all together, and but it was such a cool experience and really kind of got my juices flowing to want to be able to record my own stuff, write my own stuff, Yeah, it was such a positive experience.
That's amazing. Did you follow, during the pandemic, the Foundation Fighting Blindness uh, did this music to our eyes, and they featured lots of uh, great artists, but several with the theme of these people were everywhere from Grace Potter, who's legally blind, to I'm drawing a blank on a couple of their names, but there's a couple more. Um, um, the ex-ambassadors. One of the
That's right. I forget
Yeah,
his name, but
yeah,
yeah, I definitely remember
he's
the name of the band.
spectacular. I mean, he's a keyboardist and a songwriter, and but they performed and did it. And then this gentleman from Boston, and I'm embarrassed that I can't think of his name right now. Incredible musician, guitarist, but he performed a half dozen or so songs, um, and he has RP, and it never ceases to amaze me on what you uncover. But the reason we can uncover is because people like yourself are putting yourself out there and building a community, and we're fortunate to have one another, but it really does take people like yourself, Greg, to put yourself out there in the manner that you have. And I think sometimes we take it for granted that these things just sort of happen in our lives, but it really does take somebody. And we hear it all the time. It's becoming sort of the axiom that you don't have to have sight to have vision, and you are a perfect example of that. And I think that all of us who had the privilege to either being a guest on your podcast and as well as your listeners, and then of course the next 100 listeners, and hopefully some of our younger people are going to get inspired to try baseball, something in music. Who knows where they're going to go, but it's incredible. And all of this is a testimony to your dedication, and that you've really given us. And the pandemic was, it's come up a couple of times, was a very isolating experience for us. I mean, people who think that they were isolated by it, but then try not being able to drive a car, or be one of the tens of thousands of people that went out and bought camper vans and decided to get creative. But when you can't do those things, you had to find other ways to do it. And you're an example. Granted, you started this prior to that, but what fantastic time! You said it was 2019. Was it when you did your first?
Yeah, so I recorded my first episode in November of 19, and then released that following month in December of 2019.
Yeah. Okay. 3 months later, there was a shutdown. So, yeah, it's pretty, pretty amazing. And so I obviously want to thank you again and again. Is there anything else though you want to share? This is your moment. Hopefully there'll be other moments like this, but at least this is the first opportunity in 100 episodes that we get to know the host and creator of Eyes Free Sports, and I'm sure we only just touch the surface. But is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to mention a few individuals. So Jamie Pauls from Missouri has been my editor for the entire 100 episodes I've done this podcast, and extremely appreciative of his support and reliability. And he also happens to be blind, so really, when I kind of learned about this connection and we connected, it was a no-brainer that I would, support a fellow blind kind of content creator and an editor and whatnot on this journey. So I'm super grateful to Jamie on all of his support. And then Andre Louis, another blind musician, actually provides the music for this podcast, the intro and outro music. So just am, so excited and thrilled that, three blind individuals kind of have their fingerprints all over this podcast, so to speak, and really could not have done this without their support.
I'd like to meet them.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, just wanted to thank you, Michael, for reaching out and presenting me with this idea. Like we chatted about the other day, I try to make this podcast about my guests, and obviously I want to give those I interview a platform to be able to tell their stories. But like you said, I'm sure you're not the only one that is kind of curious about Greg Lindberg and who is this guy that's asking all the questions. Let's get to know him. So it's certainly been an honor to reconnect with you and have you do the honors of kind of, getting to allow me to share my story.
Yeah, well, the privilege is mine on that. And, you have a unique ability on a lot of levels. And, once you could take this for what it's worth, but I think a lot of us would forget that you're one of us. When you interview, you really don't talk about yourself. You really do give that platform and let people be themselves. There's a little bit of a flip side to it, though, is that I even found myself during our interview, our original, that here's a gentleman with LCA. He's living his best life, and he's but it isn't just some, a lot of us, I think, I've had the opportunity and the privilege to be in the media many times. You're the only blind person who has interviewed me. It's always been,
wow.
Yeah. And this is, listen, this, and forgive me. I mean, this phrase has come up a lot over the last few years. And the phrase is inspiration porn. And where we're kind of filling content. And I think it's great. I mean, that people have that interest, and I think people need to be inspired, but you're taking this to another level, because we're all one and the same here, sharing our individual stories, but we are a community, and this is just a remarkable opportunity, I think, for a great many of us. But it really takes someone like yourself to make this happen. But I think it's important that your listeners and everybody knows that you, in fact, are blind, and are this is not about inspiration porn. This is whatever you want it to be, and it's kind of incredible, and extremely unique. And I think that many of us who've had the privilege to be able to participate along with you, would say that we're very grateful. So take that for what it's worth.
Sure. Thank you. I definitely appreciate those words, Michael. And, it's been a privilege to be able to do this, and hope to continue to do it for a while. And like you said, to be able to kind of relate to the guests I have on, not all necessarily directly, or maybe I can relate more to some than others, but kind of showcasing the blind community that I am a part of has just been so rewarding.
Yeah. Well, thank you again and again. And congratulations on 100 episodes. And here's to the next 100.
Awesome. Alrighty. Thanks so much, Michael. Really, really appreciate it.
The pleasure is mine. Believe me. Take care.
Thank you.
To hear more episodes of the Eyes Free Sports podcast and to subscribe, search for Eyes Free Sports on your favorite podcast platform, or visit eyesfreesports.com. Be sure to follow the Eyes Free Sports podcast at facebook.com/eyesfreesports and on Twitter @eyesfreesports.